Welcome to the GetRealWealth.com radio show, where wealth means a lot more than just building a second stream of income. Listen and learn how 70% of the millionaires in America used real estate to create a lifestyle that most people only dream about. A lifestyle that includes good health, family, romance, travel, charity, and all the other parts of a balanced life. Now, here is your host, real estate investor and mentor, Steve Davis.
Good afternoon and welcome to the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I am your host, Steve Davis. We are live today and taking your calls. I've got a lot of material to cover today because I promised you this article on yesterday. It's hard to frugal your way to an early retirement, but I also want to address the psychology behind the A and B type personality. I happened to have dinner with a couple last night who were A and B, and they're succeeding. They're really achieving great things, moving forward towards their goals and so on. And we're going to discuss why I feel like that's the best marriage, is the A and the B, or the most effective marriage. But first, we had a caller call in right at the end of the show yesterday, and I was unable to get to it because I had the browser on a different article, so I missed that phone call. He said he was going to call back in today, so if you're listening right now, go ahead and call in. I've got the call manager up. The phone number is 281-558-5738. That's 281-558-KSEV, and I'll be watching for your phone call. But let's start with this article from CNBC. It's called, the section of CNBC is called Make It, and it's about success, money, work, and life. And the article is, quote, "It's hard to frugal your way to early retirement," says self-made millionaire who retired at 34. And I read through the article, and there's some good information in here, but as usual, in financial information that's out there, there's some big mistakes as well. Big mistakes. And we'll highlight those, and we'll highlight what is effective that you can use, because it's really just building on the concept that I've shared with you, that you can't save your way, you can't scrimp and be frugal. You can't do that and then expect to be a millionaire as a result, or expect to be able to retire as a result, because it's actually a very negative thing. Now, I had hesitated to say that on the air, but being cheap is actually negative. And we'll talk about that, including points in this article that bring up that exact point. But hacking your finances, ordering water instead of cocktails, moving to a less expensive area, hoarding grocery coupons just to save a few bucks has become an obsession among Americans, especially millennials, looking to get rich and retire early. Here's the problem. Saving a couple $100 isn't a life-changing strategy. The graph below, and I'm sorry this isn't TV so I can't show it to you, just illustrates, it's from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, shows that household savings, or whatever income people have left after their spending, has little effect on boosting wealth. And here's the good part. If all of you have read, and I hope you have, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the habits is a thing called the abundance mentality. It's the understanding that there is plenty out there for everybody on this little planet. Everything. Plenty of room for your ambition, plenty of room for you to be a multimillionaire, plenty of room for you to be successful, plenty of room for you to have a great marriage, great kids. It's the abundance mindset. And they bring up the point that the abundance mindset can make you rich faster. See, this kid, I call him kid, 34, he quit his job in finance and retired at 34 with $3 million. But it wasn't penny pinching that got me there. Rather, it was in large part thanks to my abundance mindset. In the realm of abundance, everything, money, happiness, prestige, it's all plentiful. More importantly, those with an abundance mindset make decisions based on the big picture. They know that wealth is a byproduct of what they do with their time and money, whether it's investing in real estate, working harder so that they can get paid more, refinancing their mortgage, or starting a side hustle. So I'm now talking, I'm not reading anymore. So what he's bringing up is that it's the thing about the abundance mindset is people who have it have a tendency to take action. They don't sit and wait for the government to do something for them or their corporation to do something for them. They take responsibility, and use it. And that's why they're getting better results than the opposite, which is the scarcity mindset or the scarcity mentality. These people make fear-based decisions. I'm reading again. These people make fear-based decisions and avoid taking risks at all costs. They give in to lifestyle constraints, move to cheaper cities, choose to rent instead of buy, and so on. In other words, they believe everything is limited and that extreme frugality is the only way to get rich. Goes on to say, life is harder when you only focus on saving money. And then they bring up these points that are just devastating to your life. In other words, having the scarcity mentality destroys your life. It keeps you from taking action. You just kind of sit there. And here are the points. You get bored. You get lonely. While the benefits, I'll read this one because that one may not make sense at first. While the benefits of relocating to a place with lower cost of living is nice, you find it hard to meet new people. Trust me, the older you get, the truer this becomes. As a result, your social life slowly dwindles along with your network of friends and contacts that took years to build, and you simply moved away. Next point, living arrangements become uncomfortable. You start scrimping and moving to smaller and smaller places, thinking somehow you're going to save your way to $1 million. You miss out on real estate gains. In other words, your home's going to double in value about every 20 years. If you're in there 40 years, it's going to triple in value. Well, quadruple, in value. So you miss out on that. Well, that could be, let's do the math. You buy a $250,000 home. In 20 years, it's worth $500,000. In 40 years, it's worth $1 million, and it's paid in full. You're a millionaire. But because you scrimped and didn't buy a home, you don't have that $1 million. Then here's the other dangerous one. This one is the one that I've hit on, and I believe it's true, that cheap people don't value themselves. Therefore, they make less money. See, if you're cheap and you think other people's work is not valuable, guess what you do to yourself? The same thing. And you begin to work for less money. You begin to accept jobs with less money. Just flat out, you make less money. That's not helping, to say the least. A lot of people in this situation, the next point on the article, they miss the window for having kids. They think, I'm going to put off having kids till I'm wealthy. Well, they never achieve it because this system doesn't work, this business model doesn't work, and they literally miss out on having kids. And then there's another group of people, the last point, they can't even afford to have kids. so they don't have kids. Man, just horrible. So here's the smarter early retirement strategy. Prioritize your career. In other words, make the most, if you're going to trade time for money, which we all do, make sure you're getting the highest and best use for your time financially. And we'll talk more after the break. This is the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I'm your host, Steve Davis. If you've got a question for me, give me a call at 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. You're listening to AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas. Thanks for listening. Did you know that 70% of the millionaires in America used real estate as their main investment vehicle? You can and should have some real estate in your portfolio. This is Steve Davis, host of the GetRealWealth.com radio show. Starting with bad credit and no money at age 27, I began investing in real estate. By 30, I was retired. I will be explaining this at a free 2-hour introductory workshop this month. If you would like to attend, go to GetRealWealth.com. That's GetRealWealth.com. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Phone lines are open, 281-558-5738. Don't worry about the subject matter I'm covering. If you've got a question, join me. I will get your question answered and get back to this material. But we're talking now about the positive list, or the things that are effective, or the smarter early retirement strategy. And we're talking about optimizing your earned income. And I've got a sales pitch for you. Work a job you love. You will always, you may not initially, you may have to take a pay cut to go to the job you love. But if you're good at it and you truly love it, chances are you're going to end up making more money than being at a job you're miserable at, because you can't fake that. Your boss knows you're miserable. And if you're getting passed up on promotions, it may be because they know you're miserable. Remember the old phrase from Ralph Waldo Emerson, "Who you are speaks so loudly I cannot hear what you're saying." They know. It comes across. If you're unhappy, you're not going to get the promotions, you're not going to get moved up, and you don't even want to. You hate your job. Get into something that you do love. I will say this, though, if you read this article, there's a huge misstatement here. It says your full-time job is your winning ticket to early retirement. No, no, no. Your job is simply to pay the bills, and your retirement comes from your passive income. But if you'll notice, when you read this article, if you look it up, they don't even talk about it. They don't even talk about building a second stream of income, or they do for a split second. They call it a side hustle. But that's all they say. That is, hey, you could also have a side hustle. No kidding. Well, when you look at the 5% of people who retire successfully in America, guess what they all have? A quote-unquote side hustle. 70% of them have real estate. Next, they talk about maxing out your retirement and savings accounts. This is also a no-no to me. I would switch this with aim to max out your real estate investments. Start building wealth with real estate, not putting it in a 401k or IRA. Now, are there exceptions to the rule I just gave you? Yes. Later in life, especially when you're thinking about legacy, what you're going to pass on to your kids, they become extremely valuable really right after 50. Invest your savings. I agree with that. Definitely get every dime you've got saved invested in income-producing real estate. And then stay on top of your finances. Watch your real estate. Make sure it's properly managed and that you are educated in such a way that you know how to maximize the potential from those houses. The example I'll give you, we had a guy come in, 40 houses, took the 2-day class, came out and goes, man, if I'd have known that, I'd have over 100 houses. And he went on to buy, I think, 123 or 124. So don't think that if you are out there with a bunch of rent property by yourself without a mentor, that you know what you're doing. Sorry to be rude. I'm proud of you. Congratulations. But you'd be twice as good, probably have twice as many units if you had had a mentor that had twice as many units and could show you that path. And then there's also a huge number of you still in single family that should have moved to apartments a decade ago. You're not in the highest and best use for your real estate. So make sure you get educated and make the most of it. Stay on top of your finances, stay on top of your real estate, be the best investor that you can possibly be. So in a nutshell, just to summarize this particular article, it is not hard to frugal your way to early retirement. I believe it's impossible, because to save $1 million, you have to make $1 million. That's $50,000 a year you would have to save for 20 years in a row to come up with $1 million. So just counting the number of times you flush the toilet, reusing your dental floss, cutting coupons is not going to make you $50,000 a year to save. It's just ludicrous. Okay, so there's that article. Again, you can find it at CNBC. The subsection is called Make It. When I Googled it, it came right up, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding it. Just type in Make It and enter, and it comes up. I will tell you this, I had trouble with their search engine finding this article. In fact, I couldn't find it. It was emailed to me. It's hard, but the name of the article is, It's Hard to Frugal Your Way to Early Retirement. It's hard to frugal your way to early retirement. If you want to go find it and read it. Okay, now let's talk about this A and B type personality, because as a mentor, I deal obviously with A, B, even sometimes C and D personalities. I'm not even going to bring up the C and D personalities today. They're all, in my opinion, in my life experience, a hybrid of the A and B personality. So if you understand the A and B personality, you'll understand the C's and D's as well. But let's start with the A. I'm an A. I'm probably 80 or 90% A and only 10 or 20% B type personality. My wife, on the other hand, is the reverse. She's a massive B type personality with a touch of A, probably 95.5. And do you know that that's the way you want it? We argue all the time. But do you know that the biggest growth in our relationship has always spawned from some type of argument? And I think it comes from, I'll refer to this book by the Silkwood attorney, doggone it. Anyway, it's called How to Argue and Win Every Time. Now, the title sounds arrogant, doesn't it? But it's not. The reason is sometimes losing your side of the argument is winning. And that's how I feel in my relationship with Josie, is we argue a lot, but it's always to get together. It's always about something that once we do come to an agreement, and we almost always do, we're closer than we were before. Jerry Spence is his name. Jerry Spence, How to Argue and Win Every Time. Fantastic book. And what he talks about is, as an attorney, when he would argue in the courtroom, he was arguing to beat the opponent, to win the argument, to be separate. Hey, I'm right, you're wrong. Whereas in the love relationship, the argument is to come together. It's to become closer. And sometimes you lose because you're wrong. And that's okay, because you end up closer. You have a nicer, more pleasant, more passionate relationship. It's really very effective. So anyway, my argument is the A and B being married is a excellent combination. And the warning is, if you're two type A's or two type B's married, what has a tendency to happen is you agree with each other right into poverty. You just agree. You're both the same personality. See, I always felt like this, and I know this is brutal to say, but if you're not arguing, one of you shouldn't be there. One of you's useless. Arguing in the love relationship, and I'm not talking about fighting, punching. I'm talking about good, healthy, heated debate, arguing points, discussing things in a sometimes harsh manner. That's the greatest thing in the world. If you're not arguing and you're just agreeing with each other, guess what? You're going to stagnate. We'll talk more about this in a moment. This is the GetRealWealth.com radio show, GetRealWealth.com radio show. Phone lines are open at 281-558-5738. You're listening to AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas. Thanks for listening. 70% of the millionaires in America used real estate as their main investment vehicle. Listen to the GetRealWealth.com radio show to find out how you can do it too. Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. right here on AM 700 KSEV, the voice of Texas. Welcome back to the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Phone lines are open right now. If you've got a question for me about anything to do with your real estate or about the subject we're discussing, give me a call, 281-558-5738, 281-558-5738. Got an anonymous email here talking about getting a mentor with an A-type personality. And this individual has a B-type, and it's kind of long, but in summary, basically what he said is that getting an A-type into his life changed his life. That when he was by himself and he was all B, he couldn't take action. Risk is very scary to a B-type. They're very relaxed. They're very patient. They're very easygoing. They've usually got perfect credit. They've usually got a lot of savings. So B-types are successful at certain things, just like A-types are. And I discovered this over the last 30 years by being a partner with a guy who was mostly B. And I remember when I was young thinking, he's crazy. He doesn't want to take risks. He loves accounting. I hate accounting. I love risk. Then eventually I began to recognize that he had really good traits that I could adapt, and that I had some really bad traits that I could replace with his traits. So what it is, and where I was heading with this whole sales pitch, if you will, is that you want on your team someone who's the opposite of you, because it will, you have to have respect for them. Some of the stuff that I do, buying 500 unit apartment complex, that sounds crazy to you B-types. That's loony. You bought it at 29, I guess. I bought a 10 unit apartment. That's crazy to a B-type. To an A-type, that was the only thing to do. There was no choice. I had to do it. Can you see how if you respect the other type and you start looking for the characteristics that can complement or replace bad characteristics that you have as a B-type, there's massive growth. Massive growth. When I started respecting my partner and understanding why he loved accounting, guess what? I started enjoying accounting more. I don't love accounting, but it's made all the difference in many of my deals because I liked it enough to stay on top of it and to see the mistakes when they happened instead of being an A type that doesn't even look at the books and doesn't see mistakes coming. Does that make sense? If I had not have been humble and said, this guy's got some really good characteristics, and incorporating them into my life, there's deals that could have failed because I wouldn't have checked. But because I did adapt those characteristics, I was able to make deals work that a normal A type would have run into the ground. If I go back and look at all the apartment complexes that I bought from mismanaged properties, the owners I was buying from them were, guess what? Mostly A-type lunatics like myself. And they didn't have any B characteristics, so they failed. Well, now you're thinking, oh, so the B's the better, the B's the better. Nope. The B's can't take any action. They're scared to death. They're too comfortable. Oh, it's hard to take risk. I don't want to get uncomfortable. Why do they have perfect credit? Because they've never done anything. Why do they have money in savings? Because they've never done anything. They're scared to death of the world. They're scared of risk. But why do the type A's have bad credit? Because they tried everything. They threw the poop up against the wall to see how much would stick, and some of it didn't stick. So the type A, just so you know, they're very competitive, very and what have I told you about myself? I am a time-sensitive guy. They can be hostile and aggressive, which I had to learn to control, and I did so by imitating a B type. The type B is more relaxed, more patient, more easygoing. But again, with that patience comes what? Procrastination. Danger. Danger. So what you want to do is go Google type A and type B personalities. I spent probably 2 or 3 hours last night on it. There's many great articles, a lot of great graphics that give you an idea of what it is, what the two types are, and try to determine where you lean. Be very careful, A types though. I've noticed, including last night, that A types have a tendency to not want to admit they're A types. It seems like all the B types, yeah, I'm a B. But the A's have a tendency, oh no, I'm pretty balanced. I'm this, that, and the other. Really? Don't do that. Figure out which one is dominant, because in almost everybody, it's dominant, one or the other. Now, if you tell me you're already a multimillionaire, you're probably pretty balanced. You're part A, part B, or you're an A and your spouse is a B, and the two of you work together very well, like the couple last night. Very well-balanced couple, amazing. Very sharp. She's the A-type. She's the aggressor out there buying apartment complexes. And he watches the numbers. He loves numbers. Just like normal being. So I'm telling you, if you're in a relationship where you argue a lot, you're actually right where you should be. You just need to learn how to argue to get together, as opposed to how most people argue, which is to get apart. I'm right, you're wrong. You need to argue to come to the most effective conclusion and give way if the other person is the one who's got the effective conclusion. In other words, if the other person is right. If you'll keep those words out of there, remember, I always talk about the words right and wrong are very ego-based. It's very painful for most people's egos to admit they're wrong. So if you're arguing with a spouse or somebody you love, a close friend, a relative, a child or a daughter, son or a daughter, remember, you're arguing to get to the most effective solution, not to get separate where one's right, one's wrong. And remember that losing an argument in the love relationship is actually winning, isn't it? It is. And I'm telling you, those big arguments where you finally come down and you go, man, I was wrong, you were right, that is more effective, brings you closer than you can possibly imagine. You know, I've been married 33 years to the same woman, and it's because we argue to get together as opposed to arguing to get separate like you would in a courtroom. So there's a little bit on the type A and type B personality. We will hit this again, not on a monthly basis, but certainly on a quarterly basis, because there's so many people out there that are Bs that are perfect fits for me to mentor. But guess what I've hired? B mentors to help the A-type personality. Now, because I've become so balanced over the years, I can work very well with an A-type, but I made sure that I hired a B-type operator, multifamily operator, to offset my A-type, and I hope that makes sense. Okay, let me finish this email. I think that's it. Oh, he's asking about the free workshop this evening. Yes, there is a free workshop this evening. You cannot reserve a seat by email. You've got to go to getrealwealth.com. Getrealwealth.com. Upper right-hand corner will be the free workshop button, and you can reserve a seat there. I'll send you the link after the show. Okay, if you've got a question for me, or if you're that gentleman that had a question yesterday, please call me, 281-558-5738, 281-558-5738. I guess before I proceed, the gist of what I'm trying to say is define yourself analytically. Are you A or B? If you're an A, you're going to think B behavior seems crazy to you. My idea is do not do that. Have respect for the B personality. Even though it may be boring to you, it's still got its effective characteristics. And what you want to do is very carefully pick up the characteristics and replace the bad characteristics that you have. Same for B. If you're a B, get yourself an A mentor. Okay, phone lines are open, 281-558-5738. You're listening to the GetRealWealth.com radio show. Thanks for listening. Did you know that 95% of Americans fail to retire by age 65? On the GetRealWealth.com radio show, we study what the 5% who are successful are doing. 70% of them own real estate. Listen and learn how you can use real estate to build wealth and passive income. Listen to the GetRealWealth.com radio show every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. right here on The Answer, AM 1070 KNTH. Welcome back to the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I'm your host, Steve Davis. We are in the final segment of today's show, so if you've got a question for me, you need to call me right now. It can be about anything to do with your real estate or getting your first piece of real estate. That reminds me, I got some good emails yesterday of people talking about making a commitment to their spouse to buy one rent property this year. I'm very excited that the show had that effect, because that was really the goal that I had, was to get some people to go, doggone it, I'm going to get one this year. That's my whole goal. I'm going to get a mentor, take a class, and get my first rent property this year. It's a very, I'm not going to say easy, because psychologically it's not. It's going to be something that's very achievable for just about every single person listening to this show. But anyway, phone lines are open, 281-558-5738, 281-558-KSEV. The article, by the way, that I was referencing on the A and B type personality, I want to give you the reference for that. It's simplypsychology.org. Simplypsychology.org. The article is called Personality-A. Personality-A. Excellent article, well worth reading when you combine it with listening to what we just discussed. Okay, let's go to email. Back to email. Jazzy says, I'm starting to dig into wholesaling properties. Today I got the tax delinquency list and absentee property list for my county. What do I do next? Well, here's the problem, Jazzy, with your email. You may have already done this, but remember that finding property is step 2. Step 1 is to build your buyer's list. I joined multiple real estate investor clubs and gathered the names and numbers of about 40 investors before I ever looked for a piece of property. And what I did was I had basically a page in a notebook on every person. I knew exactly what they were looking for. Some of them were looking for rent property. Some of them were looking for flip property. Some of them were looking for duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, some for single family. And then I just went out and found what they were looking for. See, if you just go out there and start looking for property, and you've only got 5 to 7 days to close the deal, in other words, get it wholesaled, assigned to a buyer, and you don't have a buyer's list, your chances of doing that are almost zero. Almost zero. Unless you have your buyer's list first. So get your buyer's list. Now, to answer your question, what do you do next? You want to start reaching out to those people. You've got the parcel number and the owner name, site address. I'm not sure what that means, SITE address. I guess that's the property address. You've got to start reaching out to those people. I will tell you this, Jazzy, you're doing this one of the hardest ways possible. It's not that I'm against tax delinquency lists. It's not that I'm against absentee property lists. It's just sometimes it's very hard to get a hold of those people. I always used a group of real estate agents to help me find deals. I had 24 of them. They knew me by name, knew what I was doing. They knew I was a wholesaler. And they would bring me these trash deals that they couldn't sell, but that I could sell for them to an investor. But that's a long script, and it takes time to cultivate that group of 20 agents. All I'm saying, Jazzy, is this. What you've done is good, but if you try to make a living off of just tax delinquent lists or just absentee property owner lists, it's going to be very difficult. Make sure that you've got a group of realtors, because they do come across deals that they can't sell. They're in too poor shape. And guess what your investors are probably looking for? That exact deal. And do you think an agent is going to turn down 6% on a deal that they couldn't have sold otherwise just because you're a wholesaler? Now, there are some insecure, scarcity mentality agents that don't want to work with wholesalers. They're jealous of them. Ignore them. Ditch them. Find good abundance mentality agents that don't mind the fact that you're a wholesaler, because they're going to get their 6%. You're not trying to steal their 6%. Get them to start bringing you deals as well. With those 3 things, you should be able to find enough deals to support your family and build some real wealth. Remember though, Jazzy, wholesaling and flipping, those are both jobs. That's earned income. So make sure you're holding out 15% for Social Security and Medicare, and at least 20% for taxes. So 35 to 40%. Make sure you leave that in reserve for taxes. Okay, phone lines are open, 281-558-5738. That's 281-558-5738. You're also welcome to email me. It's asksteve@getrealwealth.com. asksteve@getrealwealth.com. Now, this is an interesting email. I had a chance to read it during the break. It's basically someone asking, what should I do? My house burnt down. I'm confused that this is even a question. It almost sounds like you don't have insurance, Charlie, or didn't have insurance. Why are you not, taking the standard steps? Go hire a public adjuster to quote the loss amount. 2, go to your insurance with that number. 3, get rejected by your insurance company. And 4, hire an attorney to get that number. After Hurricane Ike, I had $100,000 damage to my beach house. My insurance company offered me $35,000. Let me say those two numbers again so you don't think I misread that. I had $100,000 worth of damage. They offered me $35,000 worth of insurance. I sued and got over $125,000. The $25,000 was the attorney's fee. So it cost me nothing to sue them. Cost me nothing. And you know how much time it took? It took me calling an attorney, giving him my address, emailing him the insurance company's information and my public adjuster's information. And then literally like 3 months later, I get a phone call. You want to come pick up a check? I said, sure. That was how much work that was. So if you didn't have insurance, who is this again? Charlie. That's crazy. Sorry to be so brutal, but that's crazy, man. You should be rebuilding that house. He brings up the idea of putting a couple of mobile homes on the lot, which leads me to believe, Charlie, that you didn't have insurance. Why would you be looking at putting 2 mobile homes to depreciating liabilities on that lot when you should just be rebuilding the single family home? So I will email you a couple times and we'll figure this out. Okay, phone lines are open. Just a couple more minutes. 281-558-5738. 281-558-5738. Oh, this is interesting. Christopher bought a house as an owner-occupant. Been there for over 2 years. Wants to buy another house and lease out the first house. Yeah, if you're in there that long, as a rule, you should have no problem doing that, Christopher. None whatsoever. I think you only have to live in it 6 or 9 months if you took out an owner-occupant loan to get the low down payment. And then after that, you have the ability to go buy another personal residence on the same type loan. He says something in here about 7 years. The loan stated that I agreed to stay in the house for 7 years. I got to be honest with you, I've never heard of that. It's certainly not fair. In other words, what if you get a job transfer? What if you get a promotion? That's really odd. I don't think that's accurate. So, Christopher, you may need an attorney on this to read through your documents and find out if that's true. 7 years, that's crazy. That's the average that a person lives in a home across the country. So they're trying to force you to live. That's kind of weird. So talk to an attorney, Christopher. I wish I could help you more on that. My belief is it's only 6 to 9 months and that you're fine. But definitely talk to an attorney. If you've got some clause in there that says you've got to stay in there for 7 years, don't do that again. That's not fair. Okay, this has been the GetRealWealth.com radio show. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Those of you coming to the free workshop tonight, I will see you there at 6:30, and we will be done and out of there by 8:30. If you do not have a reservation, you can get one at GetRealWealth.com. Just click upper right-hand corner. Thank you.
This has been the GetRealWealth.com radio show. Please remember that this show is for entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as legal, tax, or investing advice. Always get a professional opinion before making any investment decision. To find out about the mentoring and consulting at Real Wealth Academy, visit GetRealWealth.com and attend one of our free introductory workshops on real estate investing. That's GetRealWealth.com. Thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day.